Hello, I'm Bruce Williams, and with the help of Chris Weidman, we're going to talk about chest tubes today and a little bit of how we've got them to work with our mannequins and how we've been able to troubleshoot some of the requests from faculty as they bring students in. We work at the Indiana University Health Simulation Center. We service Indiana University Health, which consists of multiple hospital facilities, Indiana University School of Medicine, School of Nursing, and School of Dentistry. So we see a lot of different people come through for different reasons, and occasionally we have the chest tube requests, and we also have special considerations with the chest tube application. So we've got a mannequin set up with a chest tube, and we'll take that out and show you a little bit about how we've made it work for us and how we can get it to perform like a real chest tube. Okay, well, let's talk about chest tubes, but to understand chest tubes we need to understand a little bit about why we're doing the chest tube and what's going on inside the body. So if you think of our lungs being attached to the rib cage, sort of, but not really, it's a slick lining between the visceral pleura and the parietal pleura, which are the two linings between the ribs and the lungs. They are held together with surface tension, and the surface tension is really easy to understand. If you think about a glass of ice water that has condensation or water that has formed at the base of the glass, if you try to pick that glass straight up, you can't because it's stuck. So that is surface tension, and that's what holds the lungs to the side of the rib cage. And those are in basic terms. There's a little more anatomy and a little more physiology to it. But a normal set of lungs look fully inflated, and both sides are blown up. They're being held in place. And the diaphragm down at the bottom that lines the lower part of the thoracic cavity, when we inhale, goes down, causing negative pressure. Well, if we break that negative pressure and the surface tension on one of the lungs, the lung can deflate, and things that would cause this would be a gunshot wound or a stabbing, some type of penetrating injury that allows air to go between the surface tension, between the rib cage and the lung. Also, some anatomy or some disease processes will allow the lungs to rupture in one particular area, allowing the lung to deflate. So what we're talking about today is a pneumothorax. Also, we can consider a hemothorax. Applications are really pretty similar. So we'll talk about the basics of those and the fixes or the application of a chest tube and a chest tube collection device. Okay, so to have a chest tube we need a few things. We need a chest tube collection device and we need a chest tube. There are quite involved as far as putting them in, but in the simulation world we don't have to worry about those special techniques. So the chest tube originally comes detached from the chest tube collection device. Almost every place that I've worked in my practice, the surgeon or the person inserting them will take the clamp off and throw it away. So check with your facility to find out if their clamps are on or off of their chest tube collection device. The other piece that is special is the chest tube collection device, and in this every collection device works very similarly to the others, but this one has a water seal chamber, and we'll talk about that in a moment, a suction area to where we apply suction, and then a collection device. Whether it's a pediatric or adult, or it could even be an auto-transfusion device, which allows for larger collection of volumes if a patient has a lot of bleeding. But this is one of the standard adult type of collection devices. So normally in your kit, when you open a new one up, it'll have a amount of liquid that is predetermined, pre-measured. You'll put it in through the suction chamber, and it will turn the color or turn the water blue down here. The point of this particular area is the water seal will tell you whether or not you have a leak in the air chamber, or you have a leak in the tubing, or if you have a leak in the patient's lung. So there are several troubleshooting areas the students will work on to figure out where their air leak is actually occurring. So the air leak could be in the tubing, it could be in the system itself, in the chamber, or it could be in the patient's lung. Okay, so the chest tube, we have multiple holes, and as I roll it towards you, you'll be able to see the multiple holes, and those are kind of sumps to pick up fluid, and that not one particular part of the lung is getting suction at all times. So if we only had a hole in the end, it may actually suck a piece of the lung through the tubing, and that would be additionally bad. So there are multiple holes through here. In the simulation world, if we want to apply suction, we have to stop that flow of air and fluid coming through. So what we've done is chopped one of the chest tubes off below the last hole, and we've applied an occlusive dressing. You can use a Tegaderm, or this is 3M microfoam. It's kind of a surgical dressing. It's it's a very occlusive dressing, so no air is coming through this chest tube. And as we hook the chest tube up to the collection device, then we will apply suction to the collection device. Okay, so once we've talked about all of the different pieces, we'll apply it to suction, and then we'll do some adjustments on the device. So we're going to go to our wall suction. It does not matter on the wall suction what setting you have. You want to turn it to continuous, but it doesn't matter how much suction is being applied, because the chest tube collection device is able to regulate its own amount of suction. So don't worry about having too much or too little flow on here, as long as the indicator on the chest tube collection device is showing, and we'll talk about that. You could use a wall suction, or you could also use a portable suction device if you don't happen to have one in your lab. The wall suction available in your lab. So one of the adjustments that the physician will order, and sometimes the educator will request, is how much suction is being applied, and it's centimeters of water. This collection device actually has a dial in the back, and you're able to turn the dial up or down, and usually 20 centimeters of water is the standard practice that I have seen in our area. So as we apply suction to this, we will see that the billows, which is the red piece, starts to inflate and comes across the window. That means that there is suction happening. If I release the suction, or if I allow air into the system, you see that the billows goes away, and also that there is a large amount of bubbling in the air chamber, or the water seal chamber. Bubbling in the water seal chamber is not good. There's either a hole in the system, hole in the patient's lung, or hole in the tubing. So if we reapply suction to the system, we see that the red billows comes back across. This particular one looks like an accordion. Sometimes they're little floating red pieces. As long as the red pieces in the window, we're safe. And as you notice, the water seal chamber is allowing the leakage to slow and stop. Once the chest tube is originally inserted, you may see bubbling for a little time afterward, but once the chest tube has been in for a while, you won't see bubbling in the water seal chamber anymore. So as a student comes in and they know this chest tube's been in for a day or more, there should not be any bubbling in the water seal chamber. If there is, then they know that there's a leak in the system that they need to troubleshoot. So we have the chest tube collection device set up. We have the chest tube that is occluded, hooked up to the suction device, and let's talk about the collection device and what that will look like when you first get it set up. So when you first get it set up, the water level is where it should be. There's also a little white ball in the bottom, and most collection devices have these. So the little white ball, if you squeeze the tubing and let some air out of it, you'll start to see that the ball goes back to the zero area. Zero is good. And sometimes when a patient takes a deep breath, you'll actually see what's called titling. And so that means that the fluid volume is going to move up and down. There have been some questions on the listserv about how do you experience titling, or how you get titling to work. The only way that I've been able to do titling, or to accomplish titling, is by manually squeezing the tubing to get the ball to bounce up and down. This at least lets the patient, or let the student know this is an expected process as the patient is breathing. Sometimes it's a little more exaggerated than others, and you may have to practice to get your ball to move in the appropriate area in the appropriate direction as you're describing what will actually be occurring with the chest tube. Okay, so another important piece is an air leak. And an air leak in the system, in the patient's chest, or in the tubing is very important, as it could allow infection. It can also allow the chest or the lung to recollapse and become another pneumothorax, which could be a patient emergency. So the ways that we can create an air leak in a chest tube, there are multiple. We could just separate things far enough to cause rapid bubbling. This would be very drastic and very noticeable, should be very noticeable, as the students come into the room. That's a little too much for what we may see in real life. So we'll seal the system back up here. We could do a pinprick in the end of here, but sometimes that's pretty unreliable and doesn't really help us have much control of how much of an air leak we actually see. So I've come across a couple different plans, one of them being taking a 27 gauge needle and sticking into the chest tube, or the tubing on the chest tube is designed or described to be self-sealing. So you can actually take a needle and stick into the chest tube itself, or stick into the tubing itself, and so that proved to be pretty unreliable also on causing or controlling the amount of bubbling that we got, or the amount of air leak that we had. So the next plan that I had was to, and you can see there is bubbling occurring, so this may be about right for what your instructors want. They may say have one bubble every 45 seconds or something like that. So my next plan was I took a 3-way stopcock and started adjusting up and down, clamping, closing. The problem with a 3-way stopcock is that a very small amount of adjustment goes a long way. So you may completely clamp the piece off and you have to start completely all over. So after I got rid of the stopcock idea, I went to a extension set, and it can be any extension set with 2 ends on it. So what I did, I chopped it up and took the end that will screw onto the needle, placed the needle back into the tubing. And one of the good parts about having the needle is not that it's potentially unsafe, but that it can go any place in the system. So it can go up in the chest tube, it can go down in the tubing, or it can go up next to the collection device itself. You can cover these with a towel, you can tape them, whatever you'd like to do to try and conceal them so the students aren't able to see what's going on. And we'll encourage this little guy to leak a little more. And with the extension, I added on a roller clamp, and the roller clamp allows me a lot more fine-tuning for closing and opening, which will control the number of bubbles that you have per minute. And so as we increase it or decrease it, we're able to see how much is actually being fed through and how much air is able to be released. You can also milk the tubing, which will allow your white ball to increase or float up higher. If it starts creeping toward the bottom again, it means that it does have an air leak in it, and eventually it will give us some additional bubbling. So I think that should help with the air leak issue and should be able to work with the students and allow them to have a realistic experience in dealing with a chest tube. So if you have any questions, let us know. We're available by email or phone, either one. So just give us a call and let us know if you have any questions. We'll be glad to help. Thanks a lot.